JayR TheKing writes, my question is about the original Twilight Zone and the amount of movies that have taken concepts from this amazing show. Since I discovered the show 2 years ago, I have noticed that many of the episodes resemble many well-known feature films such as Child's Play, The Sixth Sense, Clock Stoppers, The Kid, Liar Liar, Real Steel, and Poltergeist, just to name a few. So my question is, am I giving the Twilight Zone too much credit for all of these ideas? Or if I'm not, how much do you guys think that the Twilight Zone has influenced major feature films, and what are your guys' thoughts on the Twilight Zone? Thanks.
Well, I remember, the answer is yes and no. I mean, because I do remember the original film of Child's Play, and one of the filmmakers talking about that episode of Twilight Zone. And if you don't know the episode of Twilight Zone that I'm talking about, it is one of the freakiest 25 minutes or whatever it is you could spend in front of your television with the lights turned off. And this is old 50s black and white thing. And it's about this mean alcoholic dad, and he's got a little girl who's got a doll, and the doll starts to talk. And I'm actually getting freaked the hell out just thinking about the episode. It doesn't run around and wield the knife. It's just, you know, my name's Molly and I'm your friend, and other things. My name's Molly, you should be nicer. What the hell? Then finally later, near the end of the episodes, my name's Molly and I'm going to kill you. And it's like, and I'm just, it sounds so simple, but it was the simple techniques of Twilight Zone that was, oh my, look at my arms. Look at my arm. I'm just getting freaked out about it. That was so effective. I challenge anybody to watch that episode of Twilight Zone at night with the lights off. But that being said, it's not every Twilight Zone that bears some similarity to a modern film has actual direct roots. I mean, if you watch enough I Love Lucy, you can probably find some connections between other episodes, and they weren't necessarily influenced by that particular episode, but there are certainly some, and I know that the Child's Play one is one of them. Anyway, Christian.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's a very inspirational show for a lot of filmmakers, and I think as over the time, I mean, it was one of those shows that, like you said, it's in the 50s. People still talk about it today. And I know that there's been other versions of it throughout the years, but there's a reason why. It's because it did have such an impact. And I think that it was one of the more creative shows of all time. You watch some of those old Twilight, and they still hold up because they're so, it was so ahead of its time, I think. So, yeah, I think it's inspired many, many films, but I agree with you 100%. I think there's also sometimes similar ideas, and sometimes the person who did it first, you know, should get the credit for it, but there are sometimes you think of the same ideas anyway.
It's a great question. I love the Twilight Zone. I grew up watching that series. They aired them back to back, double episodes of the Twilight Zone. It's a fantastic series for so many reasons. Rod Serling basically mined all of these incredible 40s and 50s short stories that were pulp novels of their time, and he would take those and adapt them. He basically wrote almost all of the first season and many episodes of the following 2 seasons. And other incredible screenwriters like Richard Matheson, a bunch of different people started writing for the Twilight Zone. A ton of actors, you'll see them first in the Twilight Zone, like William Shatner. He's in two of the best Twilight Zone episodes, playing different characters. It's something that I miss from modern television right now, which is the anthology series.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Which we don't have anymore. And it's something that I would love to see come back. I mean, the closest we have is American Horror Story. Every season, it's a different story. But it's like the anthology series allowed you to have these short form little mini episodes. A good example, To Serve Man. One of the most frightening Twilight Zone episodes you'll ever see. Guess what that turned into? V. The TV series V. They just simply adapted that. And then years later, They Live, and all these other movies and TV shows are inspired by the Twilight Zone. So inspiration comes from all these different things. Rod Serling was heavily inspired by
I can think of a
books.
movie, talking about anthology, like short stories. I think of a little movie called ABCs of Death.
Sure.
That's kind of that anthology-style horror
Definitely.
thing.
So, yeah, I mean, there's still some anthologies that come out, you know, but it's not like a prevalent thing like it was back in the time of, you know, the 60s, the 50s. Or even like, what was that one that he did right after that? Night Gallery, you know, in the 70s. So the anthology series was still around in the 70s and 80s, and then it kind of petered out. I'd love to see it come back. But yeah, it's a great question because the Twilight Zone did inspire so many young writers and authors who then came into their own, like Steven Spielberg and all these other people who loved the Twilight Zone and then ended up making movies that are derived from some of their favorite Twilight Zone episodes.
And for those of you who didn't know, John Schnepp was actually one of the directors on ABC's